Welcome back to What to Drink Before You Die. Today we're heading over to Spain. Oops, wait, let me correct myself. Not Spain. Catalonia! If you call one of these people Spanish, you're probably in for a knuckle sandwich. And that's not the tapa you want. This is Catalonia. When you drive over there, you realize it's a different place. It's a different language, it's a different mentality, and it's a different climate. Different everything. And if you're there in the mornings, there's this eerie green orangey glow kind of bouncing off of these ancient buildings as you try to fit your car through these impossibly narrow little cow streets in these incredibly steep, almost ruin-like, seemingly abandoned villages. And you look upon these hills with the glints of mica, which is running like rivulets through the black slate, which makes these soil types so unique, called llicorella. And you think, where in the hell am I? And the history is completely fascinating. I mean, this is a region, Priorat, and now we're at one of the most mystical, magical, absolutely spellbinding wines of the world, the L'Ermita from Álvaro Palacios. Without even tasting the wine, you realize that this place is sort of forgotten in time, and that actually echoes the history. Used to be run more or less by the monks or other monastical orders, with all of their monasteries, their abbeys, and of course the vineyards that belong to them. I mean, even the name of Priorat, echoes priories, like all of these monasteries freckling the landscape the monks, of course, who tended these vines. Then, of course, due to political unrest, some persecution issues, some general problems, a lot of the monks and orders fled from this region to elsewhere. It wasn't until basically the 1980s and late in the 1980s that a handful of families, 5 roundabouts, including René Barbier and of course Álvaro Palacios, who decided to come back to this region and reinvigorate it, bring it back to its sort of former glory. And so the new Priorat was born, but 100 times better than it used to be. I mean, there weren't a lot of funds flying around in this region either. It's very poor, agriculturally driven at best, certainly not a lot of commerce going on. So the vineyards were in disrepair, and there was never any focus on fine wine, mostly bulk, maybe sometimes good, but mostly plonk, which is such a pity because these vineyards, which are mostly steep slopes of almost pure slate, or at least very poor, very difficult to work, impossible with machines, not planted in neat rows, but higgledy-piggledy with crazy bush vines, gnarled and weathered by the extreme conditions here, crazy wind, low lows, high highs, very arid, not a lot of rainfall, so these vines are like gnarled close to the ground, almost like you would find in really old Beaujolais vineyards or Rhone vineyards, producing crazy tiny amounts of grapes, but of course incredibly intense. And when Álvaro saw this plot, which then he named L'Ermita, now we're talking about 1.4 hectare, producing round about 1,500 bottles a year, at least back then. He knew it was something special, something that would be considered a Grand Cru, something that could contend with the greatest Bordeaux's. And might I add, Álvaro was also trained at this little tiny place called Petrus, you might know it, but was also very passionate about Burgundy, and he felt in this soil that they could have the finesse, the clarity, the elegance of something almost Burgundian, at the same time the power and the structure of something Baudelais, with this altogether Spanish, almost Rhone-like sort of rustic voluptuousness and depth and spiciness, considering it is mostly Grenache, let's say call it 90%, with some Carignan and even some white grapes like Pedro Jimenez and Macabou. Again, almost echoing this Côte Rôtie-ish mentality of little white wine to give the lift and let the red wines do the heavy lifting. Well, what started in 1993 has now become truly one of the most iconic wines on the planet. And here in front of me, 2 of maybe the most important in the entire development of this young wine at the time. The 1994, 1 year after the very first inaugural vintage, 1993. And the absolutely epic 1996. I'm not a religious man, but before I take a sip of this, that's ridiculous. Come on. 32 years. 32 years. This is older than most of my employees, and it feels like it was born 2 years ago. And the coolest thing about this stuff, if you can find one of these, if you can come by here and drink a glass, if you can go to Sommbox.com and grab one of the goat boxes, the number 2, you'll be lucky enough to get a glass of this baby, or anywhere you can find it. The insane thing about this region and about drinking these wines now is that you can literally drink the entire modern history of Priorat in one sitting. There's almost no other region I can think of of. That we in our lifetimes were able to experience the birth of the clumsy youth, the ambitious teen years, and now the self-assured, secure professional time of in real time. I mean, that's wild. This was literally the second vintage of this wine. And I can also drink the 2020 right now. Wild, right? You can see the whole development of the region from its rustic beginnings to its refined present. Although these wines were a little bit more oaky, a little bit more extracted and powerful in these first few years, now the shift has gone, as you can even see from the bottle shape, because now it's being bottled in a Burgundy bottle in the most actual vintages. Now it's sort of found its stroke in this Burgundian elegance, less extraction, more clarity, and more definition, and in its own right, also an incredible bottle. But these old ones, man, are absolutely nuts. So whatever you do, track one of these down. Anything from the 90s, anything from the early 2000s, whatever it is, you're drinking history, you're seeing one of the craziest wines ever made, and the icon that would shape an entire region. So until next week, happy hunting.